Hello, everyone, and welcome to this evening's project showcase with India Foundation for the Arts. IFA, as many of you know, is an independent not-for-profit that supports and implements projects across research, practice, and education in India. In the last 29 years, we have implemented over 800 projects leading to films, performances, exhibitions, archives, publications, and much more. Project Showcase is a series that we started to showcase the work and outcomes of projects that we've implemented and to encourage conversations and dialogue with the wider audience and public about processes and practices that artists and performers engage with. Today's project showcase is especially interesting because this project creates a space for dialogue and engagement and conversations, just like IFA intends to do in these spaces as well. Before I hand over to my colleague John Xaviers, who will introduce the speakers for today, a few house rules. If you are on Zoom, please feel free to use the chat box to leave your comments on the event. If you'd like to ask the panelists a question, please use the Q&A box. And if you would like to address the question to a specific panelist, do mention that as well. If you're watching on Facebook, please leave your comments in the chat box and one of our colleagues will bring them up to Zoom. I'd like to now introduce John Xaviers, a Program Officer for Arts Practice, to introduce today's project and speakers. Over to you, John.
Thank you, Menaka. So today we have Vikram Iyengar with us, who is the curator of a project under IFA's Arts Practice Program. It's a program for artists to expand their practice in new directions through experimentation. There's one category under the Arts Practice Program called workshops, residencies, seminar, which is for artists and curators to bring together practitioners, artists, to exchange ideas and to learn from each other. Vikram is going to speak about a series of workshops where he invited dancers and scholars like Piyal Bhattacharya, Preethi, Athreya, and Aseng, Borang to lead workshops. So before I hand it over to Vikram, I would like to briefly introduce all our speakers today. Vikram is an arts leader based in Kolkata, working internationally. He's a dancer, choreographer, curator, and arts researcher and writer. Debashree Bhattacharya is a Calcutta-based Kathak dancer. Srijaini is a dancer and a theatre artist based in Kolkata. And she is also doing MA in psychology. Srijaa is a dancer and choreographer from Kolkata, but she is doing MA in ethno-choreography in Ireland. And she is joining us from Ireland today. So please join me in welcoming Vikram Iyengar to initiate the conversation. Over to you, Vikram.
Thank you so much, John, and very happy to be in conversation with Debashree, Srijaini, and Srijaa. So as John mentioned, this is a project under the IFA Arts Practice Program, and really the intentions of both the overall program and this particular project really have segued very beautifully together, because the project, as it's called, Spaces for Practice, comes out of a felt need in the dance sector, where we really need safe spaces and intensive time to serve and nurture artists, their practices and processes. This is a very different space from making performance and performing it. It's more of a laboratory space for thinking through questions, developing critical and choreographic practice, imagining, experiencing, trying new ways of doing, being allowed to fail, so remaking your relationship with dance and movement. So it's a very experimental space. It's a space that should be and must be free from the pressures of creating finished pieces to pass on to an audience. And such opportunities are really very few and far between in India. So I've often been asked by early to mid-career dancers, where do we go next to keep growing? What do we do to challenge ourselves? How do we look at our practice in fresh ways? So we hear about capacity building in various other fields, but very rarely do we hear about capacity building in dance. So this is an attempt to sort of fill that gap. I'm just going to stop here and share my screen and give you a little visual insight into what Spaces for Practice was all about, and then talk about it. So that was a brief glimpse. It's a wrap video of that we did after we did the 3 workshops. So let me just give you a little brief as to what the project was all about. So Spaces for Practice in a nutshell, I think I'm still sharing my screen. Spaces for Practice in a nutshell created various residency and workshop opportunities for dance and movement artists with these 3 key intentions: to inspire critical thinking, nurture choreographic practice, and develop articulation from a practitioner's point of view. Often we hear the scholar's point of view, the critic's point of view, but very rarely do we come across the practitioner's point of view, with the practitioner speaking for themselves. So we invited 4 very different Indian artists to create these workshops. And we really feel that if we are able to sustain this on a regular, in a regular way, then we will really be contributing and impacting the ecology of the dance sector in India and further afield. So I'm very happy to be sharing the conversation today with Debashree, Srijaini, and Srijaa. Debashree participated in Piyal Bhattacharya's workshop. Srijaini was a participant in Preethi Athreya's workshop. And Srijaa was a participant in Aseng Borang's workshop. Now, I have mentioned 4 workshops. These are the 3 we're going to talk about today. They're the ones that under the Arts Practice program. There was a 4th workshop by Joshua Silo, but unfortunately that had to be postponed and wasn't quite under this umbrella. So I'm first also wanted to mention that this entire workshop series was under the umbrella of the Pickle Factory Dance Foundation's season 3, which was called Take the City, Kolkata. And the Pickle Factory is basically a hub for dance and movement practice, discourse and presentation. And it's trying to create spaces to imagine, create and nurture dance ecologies, dance imaginings in as many ways as possible. So Spaces for Practice, trying to create this safe space for artists to hone their practice is a crucial part of that. So I'm first going to introduce Piyal's workshop. So Piyal Bhattacharya, he's a Kathakali trained artist, but he is known more as a scholar of the Natya Shastra and of various Indian philosophies. And whenever a workshop by Piyal is announced, the assumption is that participants are going to learn about Indian dramaturgy. They're going to learn something about the Natya Shastra, they're going to learn technique, etc., etc. And more often than not, the respondents tend to be students coming from so-called classical trainings, and they want to sort of add to their toolkit of knowledge that in some way reinforces their classical credentials. Now, Piyal was very clear from the very beginning that he was not going to teach any techniques from the Natya Shastra. He's actually very clear that the Natya Shastra is not about technique at all. It is a philosophy. So the workshop was built around an invitation to consider and understand the concepts that make up the title of one of his performances, Rasa, Bala, Buddhi. So breaking up the title into the three components, Rasa, Bala, and Buddhi, and inviting the participants to really tease those apart. And he really urged all the participants to challenge themselves to move away from receiving only immediate meanings and literal meanings. And that's also why he avoided actual technique teaching, because once you go into technique, the question of what is right and what is wrong, what is better and what is not so good comes into play. And he didn't want to enter that space at all. He didn't want to enter any binaries of correct and incorrect. So his intention was really to begin a new process of learning for himself and for the participants, and this process that was about self-reflection, observation, organic responses, deep and lateral thinking, personal interpretations, and many discussion points emerged about performance, performer-audience relationships, relationships between performers, dynamics of time and space, all that. And really, Piyal's key question has never been about what is in the Shastra. He's been always more interested in why was the Shastra written in the first place. And of course, if you try and answer that question, it opens up so many different kinds of responses depending on who you are, what your background is, when you are asking that question, what context you are asking that question in. It's not a fact-based answer, as in chapter 1 of Natya Shastra has this, chapter 2 has that, etc. So this is something that he was really trying to drive towards. Before I hand over to Debashree for her response, I'm just going to play two little videos. You'll see several of these in the presentation. We did many Instagram reels as a way of sharing these more or less closed-door workshops with the larger public. And one of the things we did was we asked workshop participants to share daily reflections and questions that were occurring to them while going through the workshop process. So I'm just going to share two of those from Debashree and Chiroshree, who were both participants in Piyal's workshop. And then I'm going to ask Debashree to come in with her response as a participant in Piyal's workshop.
You know, all these questions as what is tradition, what is classical, do we need to stretch our boundaries, do we need to repeat? In tradition, we keep on repeating. We like to be in that comfort zone. So all this was there, you know, when I started my journey as a choreographer with my colleague and friend Vikram Iyengar. So it was all there, but wasn't being able to articulate at that time. But over the years, with practice, and now right here in Piyal's workshop, you know, it's giving me more food for thought. What is classical? What is tradition? What do you do with tradition? What is Shastra? Is it a burden to you? Do you want to leave your tradition just as a style, as a repertoire? What do we do with it? Let's find out.
The question that has intrigued me so far is whether the bifurcation of classical and contemporary is possible. Because as we see that classical deals with structures. So we who are the classical practitioners, we have taken structures very seriously, and contemporary, it's all about breaking that structure. So how about we erase the term break and we rephrase it as extend or stretch. If we stretch our barriers, if we stretch the structures, where does it lead? That is my question. Can it be stretched to a point, extended to a point, where this classical and contemporary bifurcation is being dissolved? And how is this possible? How is this possible physically, mentally, intellectually, and essentially? That is the
Debashree, over to you.
Greetings to everyone. I learn, I dance, I teach, I learn again. I observe, I absorb, I understand, I experience, I explore, I create, I analyze, I assess, I revisit, I recreate, I learn again. A never-ending process. I have been associated with my Kathak form for more than 35 years now. A gift, a treasure that I inherited from my guru, and I feel privileged to pass it on to my students and share with everyone the dance that I want to dance and the stories that I want to tell. My dance should connect to other arts. I should look out for other influences to be educated and enriched every time. I'm fortunate to practice a dance form, which is a synthesis of two rich cultures, that of Hindus and Muslims. Kathak as a dance form does not strictly follow Shastras. And when I came to know about this workshop, I was keen to attend it. I thought it will be an entry for me to a world I have not introduced earlier. I have heard a lot about Piyal Bhattacharya's work and his command and mastery over Natya Shastra, Indian philosophy, dance, and music. Piyal Bhattacharya created a space for me to enter, to listen, to understand, to think, to explore, to review, and to reflect. He did not teach us the techniques. He's a scholar who has studied and researched for years, digging deep into the Shastras. He came out of it and looked at it from a distance as an outsider. He entered again. He interpreted and made the text, the Shastras, his own. He chose few words from the Natya Shastra and used them as tools to be used for some movement exercises in the workshop. Prior to the exercises, we had hours of discussion. Some very interesting words that intrigued me were Shabdi Bhavna, Arthi Bhavna, Gyan, Achar, Bichar, Tik, Desh, Kal, Karana, Chari, Ishwar, Karta, and so on. These words were impulses and triggers for us to explore. I found it very interesting and intriguing. For example, when I occupy a space, I become the Ishwar or Karta of that space. Now, in Sanskrit words, most of the words in Sanskrit, they are multi-layered. They have many connotations. So the moment I heard the word Ishwar, it empowers you immediately. So questions were in my mind at that time. How do I look at a movement, keeping in mind the word Ishwar? What happens to my spine? What happens as the space around me expands? How do I deal with it? I'm the Ishwara. For each movement to render, do I bring in my grace? How do I bring in my persona? How do I communicate with a linear movement? How do I communicate with a circular movement? How much of self? How much of the form? I was present during Preethi's showcasing in that surreal, amazing Trump depot. I remembered the opening sequence so vividly. The participants stood there. I could see so much conviction, power, groundedness, poise, quietude. I had goosebumps, and I was thinking about Ishvara. 4 days of discussion with few activities culminated in an improvisation at Piyal Bhattacharya's house, Chidakash. That space is something. It has so much to offer. You just have to be present there and respond to the vibrations that surrounds you. Something very organic, yet raw, emerged from the impulses we are given to process Rasa Bala Buddhi. Rasa Bala Buddhi is present in all dance techniques. It is present in all aspects of life. The participants, including me, came from different backgrounds, but there was this harmony about the way we responded to each other, about the way we responded to the surroundings, to the objects. I felt that we all, a few of us were there, we all were present together at that very moment. It was quite overwhelming. And I have a lot of questions, and I have been to Piyal, I've gone back to Piyal, and I have to go back to him again and again. So the questions are still there. The experience that I had is rasa. I had to put an effort to memorize, go back, revisit those moments in January of the session that I had. So that is the bala, the effort that I had to make. And penning this down and reading this in front of you, I had to have little intellect to do that. That's a good thing. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Debashree, for bringing it back to Rasa Bala Buddhi in such a beautiful fashion. Truly, having interacted with Piyal, the way he invites and inspires you to take journeys that you would never have dreamt of, journeys of imagination, and making connections that you would never have dreamt of, is really opening up. He really opens up worlds of thinking for all of us. Also, Debashree has also mentioned Preethi's workshop, which is what we are going to come to next. And she's also mentioned already in her own experience how conscious she was of working together with people in a space. And that is something that's very key to the workshop that Preethi brought in. So I'm just going to share my screen again to go back to
the question. The question that has
So with Preethi's workshop, Preethi arrived with 3 elements. Preethi's workshop really brought together 3 elements that had not met each other before as the starting point. She came with some choreographic structures from her pre-existing piece called Conditions of Carriage. The second element was a specific site that has never seen dance, the Belgachia tram depot that Debashree has mentioned, and you can see photographs of the site on your screen. And the third element was a completely new set of participants who had never met Preethi, except for one of them, and who Preethi had never worked with before, and who had never been to this particular site in question. They've literally encountered the site on the first day of the workshop. So the coming together of these 3 elements really steered the participants away from anything they had known before. They didn't know each other. So the comfort zone that they may have inhabited was really erased to a great degree. And that was actually very important for Preethi. I mean, she had mentioned that in today's environment, the teaching and learning has become very individualized and isolated. So to create a feeling of community and a sense of ensemble is a task in itself, and that was really a lot of the work that was being done in this workshop. Preethi had identified two major takeaways that she would have liked the participants to go away with, and Srijaini will talk about that and about other things. One was the importance of structure, because she was saying that she'd often encountered dancers who then become choreographers, especially in our country, where we don't really have training to be a choreographer. But dancers turn into choreographers without necessarily having the tools to do so. So what are those tools that one needs to have access to? And the second one was questions of how to train the body. What training do you need for what kind of work? And that to understand that you may not have all the answers and all the training, and you may need to work in a sort of collective fashion in order to gather that training. And really through both these things, you sort of approach a sense of openness in terms of making, understanding that there are several choices available to you, and that there is no right way or wrong way, but a right way that makes sense to you for where you are and who you are in that particular moment. So I'm again going to share a couple of videos to give you a little sense of the piece, of the process, and then we will move on to Srijaini. So the first video is an excerpt from the workshop session where Preethi is discussing some of the questions that came her way about the structuring of the workshop.
As dancers, we get on a stage with some idea of how we have to present the body, right? And usually a technique is there at your service to say, now I am doing this, now I'm showing you this line, or now I'm telling you this story, etc., etc., etc. Now, what does a sports person do in an arena? They play, or they do their, whether it's a running event or a jumping event or a swimming event, that activity is performed. There is performativity.
And there is technique also.
There is technique also, exactly, right? So where is the dialogue between that technique and that performance and this technique and this performance? Meaning there's dance and there's sport, right? Both have performativity. One is judged by a competitive element in that there is how functional it is, and you have to be faster, or you have to score a certain number of points for coming first, or for winning a certain for a purpose. Whereas in the dancing, yes, it's also competitive, but it is in a very, very different way. There's a decorative element. There's a certain decorative element involved in the performativity of dance generally. So I wanted to propose that we take something of an overlap between these two things, but where we take away the idea of competition and we take away the idea of decoration.
The next video that you're going to see is, again, one of the Instagram reels that we did, and we kept doing these fun things. What's the point of doing all this if we don't have fun? So yeah,
as dancers.
Sorry, trigger happy fingers. This next video is a response from Shohini, who was one of the participants, but you'll also get a sense of the space and get a sense of a certain kind of camaraderie that the participants had developed, which I think was very important and can only happen in intensive situations like this. It doesn't happen in a 2-day workshop.
Srinidhi, how does it feel to be the metronome of the group?
Strange, I've always been that, so I love to be, but and this was one of the reasons why I was here in this joining this
person.
I'm welcome. I'm more excited about looking at how we all are standing, what we propose while doing that, what are we thinking? How does it reach to the audience? Metronome is fine. And jumping.
This is very jump. Srijaini, jump quickly. Okay, this is not how we are jumping.
So now that you have seen Srijaini jumping in that odd fashion, I will hand over to her. Srijaini, you can stop giggling and take over. Thank you.
Hi everyone. First of all, it came as a surprise that this video would be shared on this panel. I am Srijaini. I am a dancer and a theatre practitioner based in Kolkata. I have practiced mostly classical dance in the forms of Bharatanatyam and Mohiniyattam. And I am also a student of psychology. So my real aspiration lies in where can we find mental health in the performance sector, and how can dance and mental health really coexist? And one of the reasons why I took up the new Clearage workshop, or Preethi's workshop, was three things mainly. One of them was that it explores a completely new space in Kolkata. We have always thought of, like, there are conversations about how Kolkata is a dying city because of its slow pacedness. And it was interesting to me how Pickle Factory really thought of it as, okay, even if it's dying, even if something like Belgacia Tram Depot, which has not been used in a very long time, especially as a space for performance, can give rise to a different dialogue. The second reason why I joined the workshop was New Clearage was an excerpt from Jumping project, and I have seen some elements of that Jumping project, and I was really intrigued that how does one jump into a performance, or how does jump become a performance? And the third thing, which was very interesting in that Google form, was that it was written that anyone can join, like anyone with or without experience of dance can join this workshop. And given how Pickle Factory had programmed spaces of practice, it required a certain level of knowledge in dance to be in space of intensive practices of continuously 10 days and developing a piece. But that was the only form that really said that, you can be from any background and still come in. Like, I think others too had that, but it was very specific that it does not matter where you come from. And when we first met in the studio, actually we saw that diverse group of people suddenly in a space where we are creating a performance. And in the last like 1 decade of me dancing, I have never realized that I have never had the opportunity of really working with others who do not have any experience in dance. So that was very new. And right when we entered the space, usually there's a nervousness that you feel. And what Preethi did for the first day was get us into structure. Because I think right before this, when Vikram was sharing Piyal's questions, and Chiroshree had talked about the bicycle of extending the structure, or extending like a bifurcation between contemporary and classical, and how structure can be still explored by extending it. I think the introduction of structure is also important because it gives you a certain level of grounding. And Preethi's workshop, I think, was in ways life changing for me, or perspective changing, because without any conversation, without any like, we had very little time to actually have a one-to-one conversation with her. We did have discussions, but through the way she structured us into our routine, like warm-up routine, and then getting into jumping, and then getting into the space of tram depot, and then getting into a cool down. She really laid it with care, and not just care for from her to us, but for our own bodies. Like, and that was something that was really eye-opening, that how much care can be led into rigorous practice. Because I think oftentimes we forget that just to be at the top, or just to be a really effortful dancer, or any form of performer, or any form of practitioner, be it sports, be it dance, be it anything else, we forget that there is an element of care that is constantly required, because ultimately the body will break down after a point if we do not attend to its voice. And that was the most fundamental time point in that particular workshop, that it was constantly, we were reminded to take care. And someone had asked Preethi that why jumping? And to that she answered that jumping is the only form of movement, or a move that, where you cannot cheat. Because if you go up, you have to come down. There is no other way you can go, and you cannot cheat. And just as she was talking about taking away a decorative element, it was the first time we were so close to an audience when the open sharing happened, or the showcase happened. We were so close to an audience, and she told us that it's okay if you sweat, if you breathe through your mouth. Let them see it. Let them really experience how much effort you're actually putting in. And that is another thing that she really taught us, was what's being authentic. And when you're a space like Belgache Tram Depot, it's like huge. It's huge, and you feel this little in front of it. And you realize your insignificance, but then through the very bare minimum effort of really how do I stand, and how do I make myself tall even in that larger than life space, you really feel that you can make a mark, or you can really again find your grounding. Another thing, by introducing that structure of mathematical calculations, she also taught us shared responsibility. That, oftentimes, again, when I want to perform, or if we want to become performers, our practice becomes very individualized or very self-centered. But when we tried creating new clearage, it is not about only knowing my counts. I have to know, there were 4 groups, so I have to know A's count, B's count, C's count, D's count, and all of our counts. So when we come back together, we are all on that same count. So, and as Shohinidhi was the metronome, and yet we had to be on alert and waiting in full alertness, like in Shohinidhi's words, that we have to be there fully, for not only for ourselves, not only for the audience, but for each other. And finally, what really stayed with me was, I think I had like Srijaa, and we were in a conversation after spaces of practice got over, and we were talking about reorienting with slowness. Preethi's workshop was, or even the entire period of the January period, the 10 days, 4 hours, consistently working on the same one thing of a 20-minute thing, was reorienting with really slow movements. Just, how, if I'm here, how do I stand up and just look? How do I have a gaze which is neutral, which does not invite, which is inviting, but at the same time, I'm just not decorating it. And again, really moving in tune with my own body. What is my body saying, and where is it saying? And that was the point after Preethi's workshop that I realized that this is what I want to really work on. This is where I found my grounding, that body in performance space where care is constantly involved. And it has been a real theme. And finally, what Paramita Di and Paramita Shaha and Preethi really discussed on our showcase was, it felt like war. Like Paramita Di said that it felt like the dancers were in war. And it is truly, we are at war. We are at war of competing with, or competing or contradicting a practice which only talks about rigor and consistent practice, but we are at war with it because now we know that we also need to put in care, we need to put in love, and sometimes we need to take it slow. And I would finish with what Preeti said on that last day, that body is the last place where democracy truly lives. And yeah, like it truly is in today's world, in today's time, and with the realization of everything that that workshop brought, it is truly the last piece and the only place where democracy resides. So thank you.
Thank you, Srijaini, and also for ending with that point about democracy, because that's actually in various ways all three workshops. But that's one of my overall takeaways, that we were really able to, in various ways, create an atmosphere of non-hierarchy, of democratic thought space, attitudes in various ways. And that has come back to me from so many participants in so many words. And that I think that's really, really a beautiful thing that we managed to do together, to make a space where voices are heard, where space is made for other perspectives and respected, not just making space, but respecting other people's perspectives. And really that's a great segue also into Aseng's workshop, because Aseng, okay, I have to do this thing again of sharing my screen. Now, what am I sharing here? So yeah, Aseng's workshop was the only one where she completely recreated a piece that she has already made in Delhi. It's called Terms and Conditions Apply. It was also the longest workshop. It was 1 month with just 4 people. She'd made the piece earlier in Delhi, and for her, it was important to recreate it because she felt she'd become too comfortable with the work and she wanted to make herself vulnerable again as a choreographer. And she also wished to rebuild the piece with the terms and conditions that apply in a very different context that she'd never actually been in, and that is Kolkata. And she did speak to me at length about the various ways in which the texture of this city was infecting the work. She was talking about softness and stubbornness, stubbornness not always being constructive. And one of the ways that she responded to this new context was to take the work, the creative process outside the studio. She'd never done that before in her work. And she took it outside into, like, they had a silent boat ride on the Hooghly. They did a sleeping exercise in a public park. And then all these sorts of things, which were not directly about creating the piece, began to then filter in. The textures of that began to filter into how the participants were responding to her impulses, to the work. And there's a great sense of playfulness also in the piece, something that one of the participants, Dennis, has mentioned. He was saying that because you had such a long process and because the process was not just in the studio, but also outside, you were talking and joking with each other, you were having tea. So your individual beings became part of the piece and part of the whole playfulness. There was chaos, and there was also structure. And both Debashree, Piyal has mentioned structure, Chirusri has mentioned structure, Srijaini has also mentioned structure. So that's another motif throughout. So terms and conditions apply also is a piece that depends heavily on the presence of the audience, in all the people in the room. And it really plays with this notion of who's the performer and who is the audience, and how are we co-creating this performance experience for both of us. So until the performance happens, neither the performers nor the audience has any idea of how it's going to turn out. And that, on the day of the performance, I really felt that sense of excitement and uncertainty, because usually when you go into a performance, at least the performers know what is going to happen. Even if the audience does not hear, there was the complete equalization. Nobody knew what was going to happen. And then the wariness and hesitation that you felt before it began very quickly gave way to participation, laughter, outright challenge, playful non-cooperation, and that's really what the piece is based on. The obeying and disobeying bodies is where is the root of the piece. So I'm just going to once again show you some videos, and then I will hand over to Srijaa for her comments.
Exchange which doesn't happen when you just stand and watch. This exchange where you understand that as a performer, as an audience, you understand that the performer can also falter and the audience can also falter. So this vulnerability and fragility gets communicated, transacted and exchanged. So I think that is something I'm looking forward to, because I feel like the city is very sensitive, or people who inhabit the city are somewhat slightly sensitive, not in a negative way, but sensitive to things that happen around them, and sometimes they're clearly very detached to things that happen in the now versus and they're very attached to things that have happened like 100 years ago. So this is very interesting for me to see how it will play out.
Hi, so how did you like the performance? It was amazing. I have never been so excited myself in a performance, and I felt like I was a child playing childhood games, and I loved it. And the last Ajit Dasta hai dance was just amazing.
I think it was excellent. It was experimental, it was immersive, it activated the visitors became participants, and it was great fun. So, thanks to Peter Factory, the dance is very choreographed.
Srijaa, over to you.
Hi everyone, I am Srijaa Kundu. I am a dancer, facilitator, a choreographer, and a dance scholar from Kolkata, India. Before I go any further, I would like to take a moment and thank the IFA team and the Pickle Factory team to invite me and to be a part of this project showcase. Currently, I am studying MA in ethnochoreology at the Irish World Academy in Limerick, Ireland. Holistically, my practice is informed by my training in Kathak, and it is also guided by somatic practices, autoethnography, fieldwork, and phenomenology. As a choreographer, my practice my interest lies in investigating the lived experience of the female body, and beyond the stage, or performance spaces, I am interested I'm interested to work with communities to foster embodied learning and an understanding of the world around us. My first memory of the terms and conditions apply goes back to 2018, where I was an audience, and then I had the opportunity to also be a part of two iterations, one in Delhi and in Germany. And when I got to know that this work was coming to Kolkata, I was very excited. Because as Vikram also noted, that the nature of the work is that as performers, we also didn't know, or we had no idea till the moment the performance started what is actually going to happen. Because each city, each space has its own dynamics, and their people people have their own way of also interacting. So to be very honest, I was curious to see how people from my city interact with a piece like this. And I think dance itself, like dancers learn through doing and feeling of things, and that is the knowledge that we also carry through our body. And I think this work also fits very well in that framework, because in like open interactions can often be threatening, but these can be sidestepped by arbitrary movements. And for this work, since we, as performers or players, and the audience or the performers, both were allowed to step in and add these arbitrary movements, which would shift the whole nature of the work. So it is an uncertain space. It was an uncertain space, exciting space, a space full of questions, and sometimes few answers, maybe. And I think this space has left me with more questions than answers. And I sort of like to also carry forward from these questions. It has it 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 has given, like, we, four of us along with Aseng, we had worked over a period of a month, and that did not only include our studio time, but also going out in the city. So as a person, for me, who was born and brought up in Kolkata, it was nice to also experience my city from the perspective of another person who has never been in Kolkata. So it's also about how this this person who is visiting is reading or is seeping in what the city has to offer, and including the nostalgia. And I think that the song, the choice of the song, rightly hints to that. So this work, I think it given heightened sensitivity of myself, of the people I was working with, Mukulita, Dennis, Abrar, and the audience, and the relationship that we shared, and how we co-created this whole piece. And it became very raw and palpable, because the honesty of the relationships that were shared at those moments were very visible. Yeah, and I think that there's one image that we worked on, which was not part of the final piece. And the image was of us. We were on all fours. So by all fours, I mean the position we are in when we crawl. And so we were static on all fours, and we are side to side with our shoulders and our hips and our toes touching. And we just started, Aseng led us through the somatic improvisation, and we started by breathing together. And slowly, our spine started moving, one vertebrae by another, one vertebrae after the other. And then together, we came to standing. At that point of time, I felt that we were like one creature with 8 arms and 8 legs and 4 heads. And that, even though that image was not there in the final piece, that feeling of oneness was carried to the final 1 hour of the performance or 1 hour of the process. And so my takeaway was also that sometimes the cleverness of the movement is not important, but it's the oneness of the movement. And that is something that I have taken away. That's my takeaway from this piece. And also I've realized that I need to be more playful because sometimes I'm like a super overthinker. Yeah, I think, yeah, yes, that's all I want to share for now, I think.
Thanks, Srijaa. It's lovely to end on a playful note. And I remember you also saying during our past chat that it helped you reconnect with a certain kind of playfulness. And I think
Yes.
even Dennis addressed that in a certain in what he was saying. And yeah, it's, I think, especially all of us as performers, especially if you're coming from a classical dance background, you forget to be playful when you're performing. You take yourself too seriously. So there are all those issues that also in a sort of insidious manner enter our consciousness. So I actually, firstly, thank you all three of you for sort of talking about your experiences so honestly, so personally. And I had a series of things to say as of these are my overall takeaways from the thing, but you've already sort of touched on all of them. We've talked about issues of the lack of hierarchy. We've talked about these safe, democratic spaces, these spaces of risk that we created together. We've talked about a sense of individuality and also collectivism, individual responsibility and collective responsibility. Srija, you've used the word oneness, which can mean one, but also oneness in a community, which does not mean that you're all thinking the same, but you're all working together. So these sorts of things were the kinds of things that, for me as an observer, as the curator of the whole process, and as an observer, it's a very privileged position to have, to observe from the outside. And to be in conversation, regular conversation with the facilitators and with the participants. These were observations that I also had, with some other details, but we won't go into all that. And I really feel that the more we're able to create models and opportunities like this, that's when we will sort of, after a period of time, start seeing impact on the dance and performance sector in our context, and perhaps even out of our context. Just doing it once is not going to, this is the pilot, I hope, and I hope that it's not just us, but that it also inspires other, sort of, what do you call them when you spin-offs of serials? So to have other people also develop modules like this, which can address this and not address learning technique. There is so much more to performance than just technique, which needs to be addressed, I feel. So I'm very conscious of time. It's nearly 7:30, so perhaps we can go to questions and we'll address things, whatever else needs to be addressed over the questions.
Thank you, Vikram. Such a highly energetic series of presentations. Thank you, Vikram, for very carefully curating this order of presentations as well. Considering the volume of documentation and materials that you have, it's very magnanimous of you and thoughtful of you to streamline in such a way that's communicated very well. And thank you, Debashree, Srijaini, and Srijaa, for very honest and very heartfelt presentations. As we wait for questions to come in the Q&A box, I encourage all of you who are listening to share your questions in the Q&A box. So, I'd like to share some thoughts and questions. So some of the recurring motifs that came in are, one is that of playfulness and breaking away from theory and established techniques and learning through doing, and at the same time care, and care for the self and care for each other, and breaking down of hierarchies and building trust within amongst performers, and at the same time thinking about democracy and collective body as a democratic tool, and playfulness as a democratic tool. Playfulness as dance as a metaphor for democracy, and therefore playfulness as a tool for democracy and for politics. These are some of the thoughts that that's coming to me as I'm trying to think about everything that was shared. So my question to Vikram is, when we think of learning by doing, and moving away from theory or moving away from repetitions and tradition, but considering a curatorial process which is very comprehensive, which involves a lot of writing and thinking through about what happened, are we also simultaneously producing new theory based on the experiences that are being created in such a space?
Thanks, John, for that. See, I think firstly, this the separation of practice and theory is a false one, I think. Practice is theory. Theory does not exist without practice. And there's something that actually I'm reminded of something that Srijaa had said when we had the chat on the eve of the performance with the whole cast of Terms and Conditions Apply, that this is the body is knowledge, that what we are creating in the process of being in physical practice and rigorous practice is a body of knowledge, whether you articulate it or not through speech. So I think we really need to shift away from the word as being the carrier of knowledge and understand that there are many other carriers of knowledge. I think the tyranny of the word is a borrowed concept. It's not, I mean, we are an oral tradition. So generally in India, we are an oral tradition, and not just in India, in Southeast Asia, a lot of Asian traditions are oral. And I think the West has read that as being not able to articulate or not able to do something or stuck in time, etc. But an oral tradition gives you this great playfulness, coming back to the term, of being able to evolve without baggage, without saying, oh, I have to stick to this. And I think what Piyal was trying to do in his workshop of Rasabala Buddhi is get away from the baggage that the term Natya Shastra carries. And the Natya Shastra is something to be played with. It invites you to play. And, even what Preethi was saying, the space of sport and the space of performance, you associate the word play very easily with sport. Why not with performance? So all these, divisions that we have really need to be readdressed. And yes, when I'm curating, for me, writing is also a practice. It's a practice of understanding for myself what I am experiencing, what I am reading. For somebody else, that might not be the way that they remember, or they analyze, or they put it down in a way that they remember. They might have other ways to do it. So for me, writing is the way to do it. For somebody else, it may be, I don't know, drawing. It may come out in a piece of visual art. So I really feel that this false separation and hierarchy between theory and practice really has to be addressed and looked at, especially in our context. And that's also why it was so important for me as curator, and for all of us in the Pickle Factory, in this project, to really make sure that whatever is communicated through terms and voices set by practitioners. So if all the three others joining me here are practitioners, everybody who's talked about the project in the links that Vishudip has shared are practitioners. There's not a single critic or scholar, designated critic or designated scholar voice that you will find there. And yet, as you have heard, there's such a depth of understanding and critique and analysis, because that's what we do as artists, I feel. Anybody else want to throw in their 2 bits to John's question, please do.
Okay, while we have a couple of questions in the Q&A box, and also some in the comments. But before we get to them, and I think in reflection of the process that you enabled, it was interesting to hear, as John was saying, the idea of care and slowness. I know, Vikram, that one of the things that you did intend and want to do was to have non-dancers part of this process. So if you could, I think, and that's interesting in creating that intersection and also those reflections and that working together and that connectedness that a lot of them speak about. So I was just curious if you could comment on how that unfolded and perhaps some reflections on that.
So firstly, again, to return to the binary and the negation of something, I used to not have a problem with the term non-dancers, but now I do. It's not, I also don't subscribe to, oh, everybody can dance. Everybody is welcome to dance, but that does not mean everybody can perform dance. They're two separate things. But again, to say dancers and non-dancers is also to say, okay, these people have a skill and these people don't. No, everybody has skills. And I think, especially in Preethi's workshop, that was the invitation. That the only thing that she had said was, you need to be physically fit because the workshop is a very demanding workshop. So we had, I think, one of the failures for us was we would have liked a much more diverse participation. We did have some, but we would have liked a lot more. What we found was we didn't get too many backgrounds of people, but we got people from Chhattisgarh and Bangalore and Delhi, and we were like, why are they coming to Calcutta? And then we realized that it's because this kind of workshop is not offered anywhere in the country. You have technique-driven workshops, you come and learn something, or you learn something based on a certain kind of concept of choreography. But this kind of space, which is an open space for you to take what you find on your own terms and run with it, is not something that is generally offered, which is why we got people from as far away as Bangalore. But in Preethi's workshop, for example, we had somebody who's a content writer. Ritik is a content
writer and a chess player.
And a chess coach. And the chess coach, Orna, she was brilliant. She was fabulous. There's so much, there is so much structure and mathematical precision to what Preethi does. So of course, if you're a trained dancer, you have that patterning built into you. So Ritik and Orna did have trouble, and Ritik was like, what am I doing? But it's also, again, going back to that thing of shared responsibility, that Ritik is part of the group and I have a responsibility to him. And they were both brilliant at the end. And Orna actually said that she joined because she wanted to do something where she was interacting with other people. As a chess coach, it's not like a team sport, right? So, and what she brought, the kind of energy she brought to the piece, the kind of I would watch her and see, my God, that concentration is just so phenomenal. It is the concentration of a chess player.
And
that she brought
and it's also the movement, right? That you see on a board that then can get transformed in a space of performance as well.
Yeah. So it's a huge learning for us. And as Srijaini said, to just break out of our little bubbles that we exist in is a huge learning. Yeah.
Okay, there are some questions from Facebook, and I think we have a few questions here as well. So
this is a question from Sujan, who is saying, such a lovely discussion. As someone who, as Vikram once put it, is dance curious, I was wondering how performing in unconventional spaces has shaped the experience of engaging with an uninitiated or dance curious audience. Sometimes the questions practitioners are concerned with can appear opaque to uninitiated audiences. So my question would be, do you feel that your vocabulary too has morphed in the process?
I'm not, well, I don't think the dance vocabulary has necessarily morphed, but I mean, it has grown, I hope, over my 40 years of dance. I really hope that my dance vocabulary has evolved. But I don't think the placing it in an unconventional space necessarily affects that. It affects how it is read and who is reading it. And I think what an unconventional space does do is release the audience and the performer from any sort of preconceived, oh, this is what performance is supposed to be, and it's definitely this proscenium kind of setup definitely imposes a certain kind of behavior and reading, both for how I'm supposed to perform and how I'm supposed to read. And that's where I think what Srijan is asking about, the uninitiated audience, is often, they may be dance curious, which is the term that we coined at Pickle Factory. They may be dance curious, but they may not feel confident to express that curiosity in a proscenium theater kind of setup. While if you're doing it in a Belgatia tram depot where everything is falling apart, including the dancers, then what is the problem? Everybody's literally in the same boat, and you're literally in the same space at the same level, eye to eye. And as Srijaini said, you can see the blood, sweat, and tears that the performers are putting in. You can see the vulnerability that Aseng was also talking about, and you can see it in terms and conditions apply also. That you're suddenly, it's not dancer to audience anymore. You're in an equal space. And how do you? It's not that you cannot create that in a proscenium. Of course you can, but as Debashree was saying, it's how much of yourself, how much of the form, what is it that you want to communicate with whatever? What is the kind of atmosphere that you want to create with your performance? Are you in this sort of I'm a Karnadata and giving you performance, or are you co-creating an experience together? It's a very different way of thinking, and I do think that if you break the shackles of space, it helps you to do that, because then it's not only your shackles that have been broken, everybody is suddenly experiencing this sense of freedom in a space that is about to fall apart at any minute. So, which is the state of the world. So, Acha, any of you three want to jump in and answer anything?
Yeah, can I add something to what Vikram said? So, responding to Shujan's question, like being in the space of Belgatia tram depot, I know one of the days, there were 2 days. One was Preethi asked us that what is the texture that you really like in the space that stayed with you, and then creating that texture in your body. And the second day, what we did was we used the materials in that space. We used asbestos and we used these U-shaped metal rods in the performance itself. And what it did was really, like, what I took away from it, or what a lot of us took away from it, was really not looking at a space with a unidimensional perspective, where if it's a tram depot, it can just be a tram depot. But what those broken doors, or what those U-shaped rods, and what those asbestos can do, or what any kind of texture either is in contrast or complementing the space can do, can really bring out curiosity and new experiences. It's like traveling to a space which you cannot Google. You just enter it, and that's it. That's your experience. And how you make sense of it, where you go from point A to point B to point C, and who are you going with, is completely your own experience. But it is also a part of a shared memory now, or a shared learning now. So now Belgacha tram depot, or any form of tram depot, for all those 10 participants, including the audience who have co-created that space, because if there was no audience to really question us or really look at, because they were walking in when we started our performance, then I don't think the impact that it created would have been created if it was just a video, or it was just in a different way that audience was sitting or standing or whatever, and would always stay with us. So every time, if it's a tram depot, it's a tram depot, or just this wall, uh, we can really look at what are the elements that we can really pull out and still find a dialogue in. And I think that asbestos thing was what uh, Paramita Di saw as dancers going to war. So even different images, but a collective image can be created with an uninitiated space. And I think what a wonderful way of really creating stories when there is no story to begin with. You just come into a space and create a story for yourself.
Speaking about expression, and I think any of the participants can also answer this. Rajeshri Ghosh, and some of you have addressed this slightly, both Vikram and Srijaini has addressed this a little bit. Rajeshri Ghosh says, you're trying to welcome a personal expression, making your body talk. The question is, by creating a new language of expression, how do you create a language where the audience, which the audience can understand what you're trying to communicate? Mudras, bhavas are codified. uh, there was a common language. So basically talking about how you're creating a language for the audience.
And there's
If any of you would like to address.
Related question from Facebook by Arunima Sengupta. It's also about language of dance, where Arunima is asking how do we develop conviction when we actually start stepping out of our non-comfort zone with relationship to the techniques that we already know and start developing our own language of dance. So
I'll start the response to the first one, and perhaps someone like a Debashree can come in to answer the second one from Arunima about coming out of comfort zones. I think coming from classical dance backgrounds, that's a question that all of us hit at various points in our careers. But this thing of language and understanding, it always strikes me as strange that nobody asks that about music or about visual art. You can go to visual art and say, oh, this is not for me, or I don't get this. But why does dance need to be understood in a very clear meaning kind of way? Going back to what Srijaini was saying, you come into a space and you make a story for yourself, which is about an experience. And going back to Piyal's workshop, the first term is rasa. Rasa is not about meaning. There is nothing in the Natya Shastra that talks about meaning. The Natya Shastra is built on the experience on rasa, which is personal experience. That personal experience could be meaning. It could just be watching a sunset and having something well up inside of you. What is the meaning of a sunset? No one can answer that question. What is the language of a sunset that has said something to me, that is also going to say something to somebody in China? It's also going to say something to somebody in Iceland. It's not verbal language. Going back to what I was saying about the tyranny of the word, there is also the tyranny of mudras. And the mudras are decorative. They also carry meaning, but they're also extremely abstract. They are forming space in various ways. And you can look at how they are forming space without being initiated into the world of mudras, or what the technical meaning might be, or pataka can mean A, B, C, D, E. For me, it might mean Z. And that is also perfectly fine. I think we are too schooled in right readings and wrong readings, which, again, going back to Shujan, what Shujan was saying about the hesitation of entering a dance space from people who are uninitiated. What does it mean to be initiated? I have a skill, I've been taught this, blah, blah, blah. But if I cannot welcome somebody else into that world on terms that are different from my understanding, what have I actually learned? I've not learned anything but apart from being able to talk to myself. And I think art in general, and definitely dance as such a primal form of expression, it's gone, moving is natural to all life. Even sedentary life moves in some fashion or the other. So if movement is natural and primal, is a natural and primal impulse, and dance is a designed form of that, why does any designed form of that need to lose the natural and the primal? And I do feel that a lot of dance divorces itself from that, which I see as a problem. So going back to the question, I would be much more interested in inviting in dance curious people and saying, what do you read? What came across to you? Even if I'm performing something which is storytelling, which is what we do in our Indian classical forms, there is a lot of storytelling. But does it really matter if you understood what Krishna said to Radha and how Radha threw Krishna out of the house? And is it really important, or as an audience, or is it that you've gone away with something that you cannot pin down, and that something stays with you and it becomes your own? That is rasa. Whether you understood what happened on stage or not, I feel is secondary. And that is what raises the experience of art to what it is, I feel. Anybody else? And Debashree, if you want to respond to Arunima's question about
Can I add to something to what Vikram just said? I think I think as humans we have this basic need of attaching meaning to everything. And if you see even the words that I'm saying right now, these each meaning has been assigned by humans. I am called Srija because my parents decided to call me Srija. This is called a laptop because we decided this is a laptop. So we don't ever question these things because these have been codified already. But then we and in this quest of codification, we kind of codified language, codified spoken or written language, we kind of go away from the knowledge of our body. And that kind of also pushes us not to think or observe, how am I sitting, how am I carrying myself, how do we walk, do we push from our metatarsus, or do we just do, how do we learn, what is the first step? So, and when it comes to movement, like dances historically, this there is always some kind of meaning or entertainment attached to it as well. So I think as when I think when like for terms and conditions, we were using language like walking, running, or sitting, which I think are available to most of us who have an able body. And and uh, and also not only the performers but also to the audience. So I think it's also about training ourselves as audiences to tap into our bodies first before even thinking of dance, I think. And to tapping into uh, and also like practicing to see performances, because movement or anything to do with the body is so implicit, it takes time and it's very personal. So I think again, like taking time and slowing it down really has helped for me. So I thought I will just share this.
And just to add to Srija what you're saying, there's a comprehension that that the body receives, which may not be an intellectual comprehension, but it is a comprehension nevertheless. So we have to get away from experience and understanding being only brain activity. Another thing that Preethi says is that every muscle in the body has its own brain. So to learn to experience and listen and allow information and experience to seep in from all the surface that we have and not just eyes, ears, etc. Debashree, you want to say something to what Arunima has asked?
Yeah, for me, this comfortable and uncomfortable, it never occurred, because I think it's from the very beginning the way we were trained, and Vikram will agree. I mean, auntie in classes, I mean, with rhythmic variations, I mean, she used to teach us and she used to tell us that, you have to make this particular composition your own. You have to try, different ways of doing it. So over the years, I remember in 2002, both Vikram and I, we started our first collaboration where we communicated with multimedia. So for me, it was not actually about coming out of the comfortable zone. It's about having a dialogue with different impulses. And Kathak, to me, this is a Kathak informed body. The center is Kathak. So how do I still hold that center and then stretch the boundary of my form? I have always seen things in that light. So and then for me, I did theater. That was directed by Vikram, dance theater, and I came in touch. I interacted with many actors. So again, for me, it was a beautiful encounter and interactions with other artists from different disciplines. So you learn a lot. You have influences, and if your vocabulary is strong and if you know what you are intending to do, I think you don't have to worry whether you have to come out of it, whether you are in a comfortable zone or uncomfortable zone. If your language is strong, you can just be there and have a dialogue, have a conversation with any form. Yeah.
I think we have time for one more question from anonymous attendee who's asking, what is, in your opinion, would be required to create this model on a recurring basis? This could be in the same city or in a different city, and how often it might be necessary to recur, annually, quarterly, monthly?
Well, the simple answer to that is resources of all kinds. But also, one of the other things resources is, it's true, it's no laughing matter. The arts are not top priority or even high priority for the large majority of people who have resources, which is hugely unfortunate. So I think for things like this to happen and to get the resources for things like that to happen, it's sort of a chicken and egg situation. To impact the ecology positively, one has to also build value for that ecology. And at the moment, we have not reached that tipping point yet where the value of dance is going to not just dance, value of art in general is going to automatically make people say, yes, this needs to be supported. Yes, this should happen. And it's something that it's even in the IFA report that I wrote, it's there. One of the reasons I feel that we were not able to reach out to different kinds of participants, even though Preethi had specifically mentioned sports people, this, that, and the other, is because people feel that they don't have very much to learn or experience from art unless they're already in it. If you were to invite people to come and come and play a cricket match or a football game or come and join training, you would have hundreds of people turning up. So why, and how does one raise the value of the arts to be something that people are conscious of, to be something that people say, yes, we need this in our society and in our communities. And that's what is then going to give us resources. Otherwise, you're constantly on the back foot, even when you're asking for resources. So, yeah.
I think I just wanted to add, resources of course, all things considered and resources available. But I think also, Vikram, I think what Pickle Factory and you have been able to do is you have these participants, you, like you said in the beginning, you're building capacity. And we hope that the experience that, Srijaini, Srijaa and Debashree shared today will percolate into their own practice and into their own spaces when they're working with, other movement artists or are looking at creating pieces. Maybe not today, but down the line sometime. We're hoping, I think there's that hope that you've built this experience that people will then want to take forward. And that's what I'm hearing from the three of them sharing as well. So thank you all of you.
Thank you so much. It was great to be able to share. And yeah, there's lots more because it was a huge process. But yeah, people can look at the links that have been shared to get more information.
Thank you so much, IFA. Thank you so much, Vikram, for having us here. Thank you so much. It's been great.
Thank you, everyone. So before we conclude, there is an announcement. Our next project showcase will be on November 22nd, Wednesday, with sound artists Suvani Suri and Amarnath Praful. They will do a lecture performance as a part of the explorations category of IFA's arts practice program. So please follow IFA on social media for the announcements. And I want to thank all of you for joining us today and for engaging with the conversation with such rich questions and thought-provoking questions. And please join me in thanking Vikram Iyengar, Debashree Bhattacharya, Srijaini Ghosh, and Srijaa Kuntu for such an enriching conversation today evening. So thank you everyone for joining us.
Thank you.